hands on that. You know how?
Plus, they're going to put your pizza there here in a minute.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Okay.
We're just giving a few minutes here for people to come in. The notifications never end. Rolling. Hey friends, welcome back to the Louisville ProActivist Report. Rolf here. Thanks for joining us today here live at Impelli's Pizza on Main. Shout out to them for having us here and for all the great food and everything. So thank you, Impelli's. Great show for you today. Very special guest with me here today. We're talking Kentucky politics and we're talking Mitch McConnell's seat. And I know everybody wants to see him gone. So I have with me today Steven Cox. He's running as a Democrat for Senate. So he's got to get through this primary and then hopefully Mitch McConnell. So we'll see how that goes. So everybody say hi to Steven.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you. Steven Cox, fully progressive Democrat. Love to have your support.
All right, Steven. So let's just have everybody get to know you a little bit here on a personal level, just to start off. I mean, we won't dig too deep. It's all about the policy at the end, but people do like to know our candidates a little bit. So just tell us about your background, kind of where you grew up, where you're from, and how you got inspired to get into politics, especially this particular race.
Well, I was born in Greenville, Kentucky. That's in Muhlenberg County. Some people might have heard of Muhlenberg County from the old "Daddy, won't you take me back to Muhlenberg County?" You know, that song about coal mining and whatnot. So it is a coal mining community. I grew up in the smaller town of Bremen, even smaller section of it called the Midland-Gishton area, in sort of the hollows, you know, the forested area around there. So most of my childhood was actually around, you know, trees and animals and whatnot. Went to Bremen Elementary, Muhlenberg North Middle School. Actually went to North Drive Middle School, a little bit in Hopkinsville, also a really great city in, you know, Western Kentucky. I graduated from Muhlenberg North High School. I do have a bachelor's in criminal justice with a specialization in Homeland Security and emergency management from Colorado Technical University. Had to go there online while I was working full-time in Madisonville and, you know, starting family and all that. As far as background goes, with the professional side, I work in a retail pharmacy. I'm not going to give a shout out to the name of it because I don't speak for them, but I do have a registered technician's license. I manage front-end operations, and then I work as a registered tech in the pharmacy as necessary. Got into politics right after 2016. I think a lot of people, you know, at that point in time were wanting to do something, and especially with everything that happened, I felt, you know, that nothing was being done, and we were sitting sort of on a ticking clock of time we actually had to affect the future and actually have a future because of things like global warming, climate change, healthcare, the increasing gap between, you know, the poor and the wealthy. So I didn't know what to do at first. I actually started a small charity group called We Rise. Didn't work out so well. What we did is we tried to focus on a local charity every week, and the funding really wasn't there, and being the only person jazzed up at the time, it puttered out. And then I thought, well, maybe I'll run for office, and that's what I did, because I've always wanted somebody to replace Mitch McConnell, but I got kind of tired of waiting for that perfect candidate to come out. So I thought, okay, I'll just be that candidate, and I'll push the ideas that I think are important, and I'll just say what needs to be said.
All right. So, hey, Sean, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Can you let me know in the comments how our volume is today? So since you've announced your candidacy, how are you being received by the Democratic Party here in the state? Have they reached out to you?
Well, actually, early on, when I started getting a decent following on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, I reached out to them just to say, you know, hey, I wasn't sure that this was going to be very successful, but, you know, the amount of followers I have is growing, and, you know, I need a little bit of help with this. It would be nice if you guys could, you know, give me some pointers. And they said, you know, okay, we'll call you back pretty soon. And that was 2 years ago. Still waiting on that call. But yeah, so not really a lot of help at all. There was one guy that I was talking to that I thought was really interesting. I can't think of his name right now, but shortly after starting talking to him, he left the Democratic Party, working for the actual Democratic Party, and took a job in another field. So that sort of puttered out as well. So I stopped trying to focus on that, and I just focused on getting out there, interacting and connecting with as many people as possible, and grow my base and getting people to realize that I'm going to say what needs to be said, and if people don't like it, and what I mean by that is, people that are really heavy, the conservatives, I'm not going to change my views, because the progressive policies are the policies we need to push if we want a better future.
I totally agree. Now you have this unique situation in your race. Now obviously Mitch McConnell's a juggernaut, he's been there forever. But also in your primary, you've got an economic juggernaut you got to deal with, and Amy McGrath. She's got a ton of money behind her. She doesn't really have the platform that we're looking for, though. What kind of challenges do you think she presents?
Honestly, I think the biggest challenge with Amy McGrath isn't necessarily for me, it's for her. She fell into a trap that the GOP does to every candidate that runs in a heavily red state, and that's they make it about money. And money does a lot in campaigns, don't get me wrong, but if money is the gold standard, if you play it by that set of rules, then you're going to lose, because they are going to outraise you. And the moment you become a corporate Democrat, then you lose the base, because people realize you're just for sale, and that's what Amy did right out of the gate. So I don't know exactly how many people support her at this point, but I do know that people realized that they were waiting on somebody to announce that it really was a horrible choice.
Yeah, and I think a lot of her individual support is just kind of more an anti-Mitch McConnell support.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. And, don't get me wrong, I appreciate her service to the U.S. as a lieutenant colonel, but at the end of the day, that's not a platform, to run on. I mean, that's just the truth of it. And if that's what you're running on, the other guy is bad, vote for me. I was also in the military. I mean, there's tons of people out there that have been in the military that still believe in progressive ideas.
Exactly. So let's talk about those progressive ideas. I had a look at your platform online, and I'll tell you, like I tell all the candidates, you did a really good job putting your platform online. It's really frustrating for people to go to look at a candidate and you look at their website and there's nothing. You don't know who they are, what they stand for. They've got some nice words to say, hope, freedom, liberty, stuff like that, but never a policy. So I can appreciate you have a page full of policies. So let's take a look at some of those. What I really like personally about your campaign, there's two major issues to me. There's a lot of issues, but I think these two issues, without those, we can't get the other ones accomplished. So that's kind of the voting rights, campaign finance reform, Citizens United is one, and net neutrality is the other. So let's talk about the campaign finance, the voting, the Citizens United. Where do you stand on all of that?
Well, really, an interesting thing I did is I bought Mitch McConnell's book on Audible, and I just sat there and I listened to it.
I'm sorry.
And, he actually narrates it too, so you get to listen to good old Mitch, for hours. Fun stuff. But you got to study your opponents,
Right. The Art of War.
Right. Read that one too. Very great.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you a good book on that. But anyway, campaign finance reform. If you look into who actually orchestrated everything to do with our current system, with allowing super PACs to just flood the market with money, it's not only that it's a bad system that we're in, but Mitch McConnell actually built this whole system. And a lot of people don't realize that. They know Mitch McConnell's bad, but they don't realize he's the reason we have so many campaign finance issues right now. I mean, if you're a corporation and you want to pour millions and millions into a race, you can just do it. You can buy whatever laws you want people to be pushing, you write them up, send them to a lobbyist that's you're paying to talk to them and say, hey, we want this law to be a real thing because we want to make money easier at the expense of our people and at the expense of the environment, and they do it because they're there for money. Why wouldn't they?
And Yeah, that's it. I mean, we talk about, Medicare for all, Green New Deal, all the free college, all these programs, but those aren't happening in the current state the way it is unless we get some campaign finance reform, unless we get some voting laws enacted, unless we get, better coverage from the press. So one of those ways we can kind of control that narrative, or not have it controlled, I should say, is through net neutrality. It's on the internet. That's where we can get unfiltered news. So why are you a big proponent of net neutrality?
Because I think everybody deserves an equal support as far as when someone wants to access their content. Shows like this, or any other progressive media source, anybody on YouTube, anybody that's not part of mainstream, if net neutrality goes away, the people that want their show to be known, your major news groups, they can just push money into it and erase the chance of, you getting viewers or anybody else getting viewers if they don't want you to be seen.
So what would you do once in office to guarantee us net neutrality?
Well, honestly, I would make real legislation that would protect it once and for all, so that way they can't, bring up this issue every time they get a chance. It would be in stone, it would be law, and it would be protected, that no one could pay for their words to be bigger than other people's, especially not corporations.
Have you had a chance to look at the Save the Internet Act?
I have not.
Now there's multiple net neutrality. I'm doing this for those of you who can't see. Net neutrality bills out there. They're not actual net neutrality bills, but the Save the Internet Act is the one that keeps it under Title II, which is what we need. So that's going around. Is that something that you would sponsor or co-sponsor?
I mean, it sounds like something I would definitely sign on to.
Okay, awesome. I like it. Yeah, I would definitely check that out. I don't know if it's going to get through, definitely not in this Congress, but it's our best bet at the moment as far as national legislation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're working at the local level on municipal broadband. If we can't get the federal level to handle this correctly, then we're going to have to put it in our own hands. So.
And another thing we really need to do is we need to break up the sort of connectedness of all of our cable companies in America that keep our speeds and our access on lockdown, and make that a public service, not necessarily something that's ran by a group of 6 different companies that have, the cuffs on our pocketbooks.
Just that homogenization of our news. Here are the subjects you can talk about this month, and only these subjects here. So, so speaking of, let's kind of switch gears a little bit here. Of taking things into our own hands. I see you're a proponent of co-op.
Absolutely.
So talk about that a little bit.
Well, co-op is basically a business that's owned by the community and by the people. So the people own the business, the people reap the benefit and the reward of the business, and they don't ever have to worry about that business going away. Rural places all across Kentucky, we've lost jobs as factories have shut down and shipped out, and if we made co-op factories, they would never have to worry about their jobs getting taken to another place, because the community would have ownership of that factory. And anything that was good for the factory, if production increased, if profits increased, that would flow right back into the people and into communities that the factory was there for.
And you also support unions?
Absolutely. Unions have to be supported, especially in our current climate of what corporations are doing to the average individuals. Unions need to be supported now more than ever.
Okay, so next on the list here, free public college. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, well, free public college, definitely for. It's sort of odd to me that it isn't already a thing, or that this wasn't the natural way that education, came about anyway, because it bars poor people from getting higher paid jobs and from going into careers that they otherwise wouldn't go into if it was just free to learn about that stuff. When you are born, they tell you can grow up to be anything you want to be, and then, at 18 you realize you can be anything that you want to be that's affordable. So, your dreams have a price tag on them, and that's not the way the American dream is supposed to work.
Now, Now, with your view on free public college, does that include trade schools? Is that just 2-year colleges? Is that 4-year universities? How do you see that?
Well, a lot of trade schools are already around. We do have our, big colleges. They have little smaller community colleges that are sort of adjunct to them. And I think that's all necessary to be free. All education should be free. Absolutely. Hands down. Education, opportunity. If you want to be something and you want to work towards that and have the drive for it, there shouldn't be roadblocks of price tags. I mean, how many ideas and how many, great Americans would we have had that probably would have not put us in this situation in the first place had there not been a price tag on everything in our lives.
Absolutely. Okay. So now we're going to get to the big one for a lot of people here. This issue is number 1 or number 2 on most people's list, and that's Medicare for All. So I see you're a supporter of that. Talk about why you support that and what, what are your plans for that?
Medicare for All, actually under Medicare for All, most families in Kentucky would not have to pay any additional taxes for coverage. Not only that, but they wouldn't have to pay premiums for medical coverage. And they say, where's this going to come from? How's this going to be funded? I have the information actually on my phone. It's posted on my website. Even the people that make the highest amounts of money are only going to pay 4% more in tax. And that fully funds the system. What you have to realize is we're already paying for our health care. The only difference is part of that money goes to ad streams, to CEO and boardroom executives. It goes to, the $1.5 million they put in. No, I'm sorry, that's $1.5 billion they put into lobbying this last year. And all that money comes from somewhere. It comes from our insurance premiums. And if they were focused solely on care and not profit, then a lot of that cost goes away.
Definitely. It's when people try to argue against Medicare for All, I don't get it because really, what does the insurance industry offer for your money? What are they doing? They're not setting your broken leg or curing your flu or whatever it is. They're not doing any of that. They're just basically profiting off of your health situation. So we don't need them. And Medicare for All is definitely a way to go. And I'm really happy to see somebody from this state pushing that. So thank you for that. I see you got a couple more things here. One of them you put modernized property rights. So what exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I think the modernization of property rights is something that's extremely necessary. If you look in most of the cities around Kentucky, what you'll find is there are a lot of places for rent, but that rent is, it's not really graspable. What you pay in rent as opposed to what you pay for, say, buying a house is significantly different. I don't really want to call everybody out there slumlords, but there is a numerous amount of slumlords at work around everywhere in Kentucky. They don't update the housing. They don't upgrade any of the things inside. I know of a couple right now that they had to have their kitchen remodeled this last couple months just because they had been complaining for a while to the landlord, and the landlord wasn't doing anything about it till the kitchen fell in, and they found out that it was actually a busted sewage line that was, leaking under their house that was slowly rotting the bottom of the kitchen away. And, a lot of our laws are based from, the 200 years ago when they made these laws, and they did update the laws, but they also gave each municipality its own choice on whether or not they want to adopt the laws. And a lot of times the people that are in office to make those decisions are the people that are wealthy enough to have several properties. Really putting that back to tenants and supporting tenants to make sure that they're taken care of and that they're paying fair rates for, places to live, and that those places aren't falling apart and in shambles. That's something we really need to, push. And aside from that, you got some places that they would rather let an apartment stay empty and not adjust the rate to something that's affordable when families need a place to be. So, I mean, that's not okay either. If you have an apartment that's, or a space that you want to rent out, yes, you should be able to name your price on it, but you shouldn't be able to name an unreasonable price when there's families out here on the street. I know in the last couple of years, I saw more homeless people in Kentucky than I've ever saw in my life. Even your rural communities have homeless people. I mean, I live in Madisonville. There's only 16,000 people in that city, but there's still homeless people. And that was unheard of 10 years ago.
It's growing here too. You can see it all around the city.
Yeah.
And to make things worse, in America we've got, I believe, 24 empty houses for every homeless person, and so that that's just really a kick in the shin on top of everything else there. And so this kind of goes back to the Tenant Protection Act, which I see as something that you're for. So
absolutely.
And then that just goes kind of hand in hand with everything you were just talking about there. So you did have one last thing that I saw on your page here, and that was preserve our future. So get a little bit in depth about that. That's kind of a broad term.
Okay, I'll have to actually update that because that is kind of broad. I'll be honest. Really, a lot of people might say it's not true, but climate change is very much real. If we don't do something about it, I'm going to be very blatant and very honest. We're all going to die. And someone needs to say that, and they need to speak it often until something gets done, because, we got a good 10, 15, maybe 20, 25 years that we can do something about it. And if we don't start doing something about it, then we have another 20 or 30 years to have no possibility to fix things, and we all just suffocate and die together. And that is a really bleak future for mankind.
So what's the solution?
The solution, several things. You got a Green New Deal that's out there. Support that. That'll lay in some framework. Thank you.
Yeah. It's delicious, doesn't it?
It really does. There's also the OFF Act. That's something that Tulsi has put forward. Definitely check that out if you haven't heard of it. That is something that's going to force us to get off all these oil and fossil fuels that will help the future. And I'm not going to say that it's not going to be a hard thing for us all to do, but I mean, if I have to pick between driving a car that runs on fossil fuels or dying in 25 years, I'm going to pick getting off the fossil fuels. It's just it's a no-brainer. If you have the chance to do something about everything, the environment, have a chance to make this a better world, that already sounds like a great goal to work toward. But if your choice is to either do that or die, then you should probably just do that. And we can do it in ways that are also profitable. There's several different scientists that have found ways that we can turn carbon emissions into methane gas that we can then turn into a profit stream in itself. And it's carbon neutral. But they like to say, well, methane is still going to produce carbon. The important thing to realize is it doesn't produce any excess carbon, so the number does not grow. We end up with the same amount that was already there, instead of our current system, which adds to that exponentially.
So I think I basically got all of your platform there. Did I miss anything or anything you want to add to any of that?
I will also add that I am pro-choice. And a lot of people in Kentucky will get up in arms about that because there are a lot of pro-life people here. But that's because what they've fed to everybody as pro-life is not pro-life. Regardless if we have pro-choice or pro-life, policies in office, people are going to have abortions. And if you set abortion aside and say, we're not going to do this, people are going to have abortions, but they're going to go out of their way to do it in very bad environments, and people will die. Also, the people that push our war economy, that puts more money into arms deals than it does into our troops. Another thing that these people are pushing that say, pro-life, 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 they're very pro-war, and they're also supporting what's happening at the border right now to human beings, which is, but it's not okay. I mean, that's an easy way to put it, but it's downright awful what they're doing to people at the border. So the people that are really pushing pro-life, politicians that are pushing pro-life, you need to realize that they are pro-death. The people that pick that up and say, well, yeah, I believe in life, I want to push for life. Do your research. If you believe in life and you want life to be a thing, then you are really pro-choice.
What they say is you can't ban abortions, you can only ban safe abortions.
That is absolutely correct.
So yeah, I have a couple other topics I wanted to ask you about. You kind of touched on some of those. One of them was abortion. Foreign policy, you kind of touched on that. We spend about 55% of our discretionary spending on the military and on these forever wars. So kind of talk about obviously it's a very in-depth subject and there's a lot to form, but kind of briefly, where do you stand on the never-ending wars, or do you support these? Are you against all of them, or where are you on that?
Well, I believe that, if you look at history, there are wars that need to be fought. That's very true. But a lot of the wars we have now are not ones that need to be fought. They're done for profit. And if we're going to spend more than the next 12 nations combined on our military budget, and we're not going to have medical coverage for our troops and for our veterans, then we're obviously doing something wrong. And a lot of that money goes into weapons manufacture, arms deals, and it's not going to the people it needs to be, which is our troops, our people. It's sad.
Let me ask you a couple of quick hitter questions on foreign policy, just kind of yes or no answers. Should we? What do you think? Should we go to war with Iran?
No.
Should we be messing around in Venezuela?
No.
Do you feel like we should have troops in Syria?
I don't really have a yes or no on that one. I want to look into that a little bit more. I'd like to say no, I don't think we should have troops there, but I also want to understand better what not having troops there would allow Russia to do, because I don't want to go to war with Russia, but at the same time I need to understand exactly why they do what they do. Is it something dastardly, or is it something that makes sense? And I don't have the actual answer behind that. So I would like to say no, I don't want our troops in Syria. I don't want our troops anywhere that they don't need to be, but I do want to understand why that they are in these places.
Okay. And how do you feel about our support for Saudi Arabia in terms of what's happening in Yemen right now?
It strikes a little bit of a nerve. I know that Saudi Arabia has been someone that we've considered an ally for a long time, but your allies don't butcher your people and get away with it. That is, that's something that stings quite a bit. And no apology, no nothing. And then, our response from the current administration was, it was just a reporter. He shouldn't have been there anyway. That was an American. What the hell,
Right. So, do you feel like that money that we make in weapon sales to Saudi Arabia is worth supporting?
I don't like the idea that people are dying right now, and that our nation's, stamp is stamped on the side of the weapons that are being built. Our tax dollars are going to kill people in foreign countries that we have no say in the conflict over. I don't want to fund that sort of war, and I don't think it's fair or right that our money goes to that anyway.
I understand. So now of course, I left the big foreign policy situation for last, and this is the one that's controversial. But what are your thoughts on Israel, Palestine, and what's happening in Gaza, the West Bank?
Well, that is the most controversial, and you'll see a lot of people sort of have that worried look on their face, because when you make a position on that, it's not just the say of a position, you're also opening the door to a lot of people here in the U.S. that will try to get you shut up or try to get you quieted if you say, what Israel is doing is wrong. But the truth is, Israel is our ally, and I would always like to stand next to our allies, especially if there is a thing that is to be gained there. I don't like the idea of fighting other countries' wars for them, though. That's bothersome, and especially if they are creating or committing human rights violations. We should be able to go to our allies and say, hey, this isn't right. We want to support you guys, but we're not going to support your actions that are obviously wrong. So I would love to support Israel, but I would love them to cut the shit.
That would be nice. It's a travesty in my eyes what's going on in Gaza. Basically, apartheid, open air prison. It's got to stop. So that kind of leads me into kind of a side issue with that. Something that's really important to me is free speech. We have a lot of free speech issues here in the country right now. One specifically, if you want to touch on that, is BDS. If you're familiar with that, the boycott, divest, and sanction. Is that something new for you?
That is new for me.
It's basically the same thing that was used in South Africa to help stop them with their apartheid. But it's basically just like it says, boycott and divest and sanction Israel until they stop what's happening in Gaza, stop the open air prison, stop the apartheid.
Gotcha.
So with BDS, it's kind of just the economic pressure to say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. We'd like you to stop. The government, our government, is not very appreciative of BDS, and they're passing laws all over the country that basically is making BDS illegal, which is against, the Constitution. They're basically saying you cannot boycott another country. This isn't Israel. This is America. It should, if somebody sees an issue with a government in Israel, Saudi Arabia, Russia, Germany, Australia, wherever, they should be able to voice that opinion, but they're literally, you can't do it here. For example, in Houston, after the flood, and they were giving out the federal money to people who had suffered the flood damage a few years back, one of the things was you could not speak out against Israel and get that money. Which is it's a big deal. You can feel however you want to about the situation in my eyes, but you can't force people to shut up about it. People have the right to their opinion. So, kind of talk about, would you support these anti-BDS bills if you were in Congress, or is that something that you would vote against? And I know you probably got to do a little bit. It's a new thing for you. You probably got to do a little bit more information.
No, it's more just that withholding federal funds from a recovery effort based on how an individual feels about foreign policy is a very aggravating thing to sort of have to sink in on.
Doesn't feel very American, does it?
That is not American at all. Wow. I don't think anybody could ever say that is a thing that should be, that is a blatant violation of freedom of speech. Freedom of speech doesn't protect all forms of speech. It doesn't protect hate speech, and it doesn't create anything that incites violence. But saying that you don't support violence is obviously an exercise of freedom of speech. It should be protected. And to block recovery efforts on mainland United States based on opinions of foreign policy is good God, it's un-American. It's not right. It's a travesty. And I something has to be done about Israel. And I don't know, honestly, what that something would do to us in our foreign policy, and how many different things affect this or affect that. But I do know what right and wrong is, and they're in the wrong.
I definitely agree with that. It's just a scary situation there. I want to say it was in Missouri earlier this year, where a teacher lost her job for a social media post promoting BDS. So I think she's suing about that, but it doesn't look like she's going to get her job back, last I heard. So that's kind of what we're dealing with, the free speech. Not just in that regard, but we're seeing it on social media now too. I don't know if you've seen any of the issues over the last year with censorship. A lot of independent media is getting deplatformed, demonetized on YouTube. It's a lot of right-wing stuff. It's a lot of left-wing stuff. It's not so much mainstream center stuff that's getting censored and deplatformed. So what's your take on that? For me, I kind of see something like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube as kind of the current public square, where people show up in the square and they talk about whatever they talk about. And in 2019, that's our public square. So I personally don't feel like they should be censored. Do you have an opinion on this situation? Have you noticed any of this, or where do you stand?
You know, it's very interesting. I follow, certain people on Twitter, and I have noticed that when they get a little bit too forward about some of their opinions, their accounts disappear, and that's a scary thing. And I know the terms and conditions of Twitter and other social media things. They say, as long as it adds to the conversation and as long as it's not hurtful or promotes violence, then it should be okay. And I agree with that. But then you see these things and you're wondering, like, okay, what did they say that was so awful that makes their account disappear, or they become disenfranchised, they lose all their followers, they have no monetization. It's basically it's a way to shut people up. And I believe myself that sometimes I should shut up, but I think I should have the ability to decide when that is and when it's not a corporation,
Unelected corporation.
Exactly.
It is. I'm kind of hoping. I don't know exactly where I want to see it go, but I wouldn't mind seeing maybe a Facebook and those kinds of things as a public utility, because we do have politicians on there now, on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, speaking directly to constituents.
Yeah.
So if somebody gets blocked off a platform, now they can't see their senator, their governor, their president speak to them the way everybody else can.
That actually is protected now. Anybody that has a political account that is an elected official can't block you from seeing that account. I don't know exactly if that extends to their personal accounts or not, but
I don't think so. I think it's just like the official.
Their official,
account.
yeah, and that's the way it should be. You shouldn't be able to block people from, public accounts.
I don't like that they did that. It doesn't control, though, Twitter or Facebook or somebody or YouTube removing somebody from the platform. Then it doesn't matter if you're blocked or not. You're
just gone.
But yeah, it seems like you're pretty in favor of free speech overall. And
I'm very much in favor of the Constitution.
That's exactly what I hear.
The Constitution right now is getting trampled upon by a lot of different legislators, and what's really sad is the whole thing happening with the abortion bans is they know that those laws, when they pass them, are going to get overturned. They don't care that they're going to get overturned. They just know that that's something they can do to say, well, I passed this law, y'all need to vote for me. And so they're passing laws that infringe upon people's constitutional rights just to get votes, even though the law is going to get overturned. And that's crazy.
It is.
And most people don't know this, but there is something special in the Constitution that protects against that. If anybody acting under the cover of law tramples upon someone's constitutional rights, infringes upon those constitutional rights, then that is actually a federal crime. That starts as low as 2 years in prison and goes all the way up to the death penalty, depending on how egregious the thing was. And the fact that several legislators got together to try these laws out and push them means that it was also a conspiracy under the law, which accelerates that to another thing as well. And the fact that they made abortion punishable by death is really telling. And not only that, but people that have miscarriages are supposed to be investigated. You have a miscarriage, the last thing you want is the government coming to you and accusing you of being the reason you had a miscarriage. It's wrong. But the fact that they're able to put the death penalty on somebody for those reasons means that they would be eligible for the death penalty if anything like that did happen. And people need to remember that. If this ever goes, up crazy lane all the way to the end, then those legislators, they're done. They're done. We're going to go in there, and we're going to make sure they're not just locked up, but they're eliminated.
So I've got two more issues to get with you here real quick. Marijuana legalization and/or decriminalization. How do you feel about it?
Well, I feel like we need to decriminalize marijuana, and it needs to be legalized. That is full recreational use. I mean, you look around Kentucky, and you look back all the way to the 70s. Marijuana's been here. It's been flowing around pretty heavily. You know, the criminalization of it has not done anything. But if we legalize that use of it, we can put in regulations, we can collect revenue off of it. You look at Colorado, and they had, you know, what was that, like a $500 million surplus added into their economy. It might have been $500,000. Big numbers, you know, who really... But yeah, anyway, there was a lot of money that was pushed into their revenue, and by, you know, setting on these old laws, all we're doing is we're going to be last to the table, because it's going to be legal everywhere eventually. It is. We're seeing it happen. And if we're the last people that jump on board with that, then we're going to be stuck here with the same amount of fewer jobs that we have in other states, the same low revenue, and, you know, the same situations. We jump on it now, we create an industry, it can revitalize farming communities. Farmers, what they're having trouble with a lot right now is that they're not making enough money to afford farm equipment upgrades. Well, marijuana crop, you don't need farm equipment, you just need good people that know how to be detailed in the way that they trim these plants. And that's a high-paying job in itself. Not to mention, you know, one marijuana plant versus a stalk of corn. There's no arguing which one is going to produce more profit for our farmers. And so yeah, there's a lot of things there. It can help with that entire industry. It helps with jobs. It helps with revenue. We can pump more of that money back into our education, into state workers' pensions. I mean, it's not like some moral high ground law anymore. It's more, why are we not doing this? Why are we not reaping the benefits off of something that's already running through our state insanely anyway? And it does not harm in the way that people... I mean, Bevan said that what worried him was all the overdose deaths that occur from marijuana. Look them up.
Yeah.
You show them to me, you know, I'll start believing you, but
He's worried that there aren't any.
Right? He's worried they're not having any deaths, so that way he doesn't have a position to stand on. Ridiculous.
Yeah, he's terrible on marijuana, amongst other things, but he's terrible on that issue. The last kind of issue is something that's, when I was a kid, my first kind of interest as far as activism was kind of in the animal welfare issue, and it's something that's never talked about, so I try to bring it up every now and then when I can, and it's very broad, and there's so many aspects, but just kind of, if you were in office, you know, go ahead.
I'm actually glad you brought this up. Something that should be added to my platform on my webpage pretty soon is going to be extended rights to animals that are shown to have emotion, to feel pain. It's inhumane in the way that we treat some animals out there. And that's not to say that all animals are, you know, they don't all have higher brain function. That is true. But the ones that do, the ones that can feel emotion, you know, have thoughts and feelings, it's not right for us to treat them inhumanely. And you don't make a person suffer. Why should you make something that can feel that suffering just as much suffer? It's wrong.
I'm glad to hear that. It's animal welfare is probably the least talked about thing amongst, you know, candidates nationwide, small or large office. So I appreciate you having opinions on that. So as we wrap this up here, I'm just going to hit you with a couple quick, just fun questions, non-political stuff, so people can know a little bit more about you, and then we can get on out of here.
Okay.
Favorite all-time movie?
Favorite all-time movie? Ooh, that changes a lot.
Or a series of movies, you know, if that's the case.
Well, there's this one that a lot of people probably don't know anything about. It used to be my favorite movie. It was called I Heart Huckabees. I don't know. I just really liked it. It was strange and whatnot. I'm always a fan of the Godzilla movies and the Godzilla franchise.
Nice.
I'm really looking forward to the new Godzilla movie that think it might be out in theaters. It's hard to keep up with everything I got going on right now.
I'm the
but,
same way.
Television-wise, though, definitely a huge Game of Thrones fan.
Okay.
That's why sometimes in my social media, you might hear me say like, look at McGrath bending the knee to Trump, because that's the way I feel about it.
Right. Okay.
Because the South remembers.
So, of all the books you've ever read, what had the most impact on you? Or what's the most memorable, favorite, however it goes?
Probably the ones that had the most impact on me. Not necessarily my favorite story, because I'm a huge lover of a good story. But I got Audible a few years back, and I started getting books on there and listening. And I got a copy of The Art of War. I was just going to tell you this afterwards, but if you're a fan of Game of Thrones, you can actually hear Peter Dalish, good old Littlefinger, read you The Art of War, and I thought that was magnificent. I didn't get bored 1 minute, and that's really good knowledge in the book too. Like, I mean, if you have any opponents in life that you need to really understand what you should do and how to maneuver things. I did it for politics, but definitely do it for whatever suits you. Have Littlefinger read it to you. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's a must-read for anybody that hasn't read it. I have a copy on my shelf, so absolutely. So we're going to hear in Impellizaries. I don't know how this will affect your answer, but just last one here, favorite comfort food.
Favorite comfort food? Ugh. Well, I haven't tried the pizza yet here, but I'll be honest, my favorite comfort food is a Reuben sandwich. I got Irish roots, and you got corned beef on a sandwich. You got sauerkraut, which is just technically cabbage anyway. But I love a good Reuben.
Okay.
There's this one place in North Carolina that I went to when I was staying there for a few months. It was called Dunderbacks, and it was called a Blue Max, and it's like a 3-tiered sandwich. Corned beef, wine kraut, and blue cheese sauce, and
oh, wow.
Good God, it was delicious.
All right, well, that's where I'm going next then.
Right. It's good stuff.
All right, so let's wrap this up. So anything we haven't covered? Anything else you want to say before we get out of here? Now's the time, and then just finish up with how people can find you online to donate, volunteer, or anything else.
Okay. Well, absolutely. It's probably evident by now, but I don't accept corporate donations or any sort of dark money. I'm funded by the people. That's everything to me. That's why I didn't raise, $26 million like Amy McGrath did the first day. Looking to her 2018 election, it's all dark money. It is. She's a corporate Democrat.
I'm not even going to get into where that money's coming from either. We'll move on from that.
Move on from that.
But we know. Don't think I don't know Amy McGrath. I know.
Yes, but you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Cox for KY. That's COXFORKY. You can find me on Twitter at Steven Cox USA. You can find my website, coxforus.com or coxforus.com, depending on how you want to look at it. It's kind of like a double thing there. That's coxforus.com. If you try to reach out to me on any one of those, or if you just look me up on Facebook for my personal profile and want to talk to me, I'll get back to you. It's all public. My phone number's on there. You can call me if you want to have just a chat. And that's the way it should be with our public officials, and that's the way I will be from here on out. If anybody wants to talk to me, I'm here. I'll listen. You got a gripe, we can talk it out. We'll find a solution.
I appreciate you so much for coming on my little show here and just letting people know what you're all about and get a good sense. A lot of people are just now getting to know you, so hopefully this will help. If you enjoy this, share this out to everybody, especially friends and family here in Kentucky. Anybody that's going to vote in that primary. There are other options besides Mitch McConnell and Amy McGrath. For those that don't really have the time to research, listen to this video, listen to Steven tell you about who he is, and take a look at Amy McGrath and realize who she really is. Once again, thanks to Impellizaries for letting us be here. Let's show you guys what we're dealing with here. Yeah, looks pretty delicious, right? So, until next time, always think critically.